We welcome for the first time to our Disney Plus, ESPN, and ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance, live dual stream to the program, our boy, Tommy P. Tom Pelissero. Good to see you, Tom. How are you, sir?
What's up, Rich in Sao Paulo? What's up to the boys in the studio back there in El Segundo?
Tommy P. What's up, Tom? What up, baby?
What's up? I thought I had been a lot of places, but this is my Disney Plus debut. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm going to add that one to the bio moving forward.
Yes. Well, with your new taller hair, you are now officially tall enough to ride this ride, Tom. So we're pleased to have you here on the program. First order of business, let's start with last night's game and the fact that Jaylen Carter got ejected and did not play a single snap of the Thursday opener. The league looking into this? Is it possible a suspension is coming? What are you hearing here on this Friday?
At this point, Rich, what I would tell you is the NFL is reviewing the entire spitting situation. That's standard. Anytime a player gets ejected from a game, they take a look at that to see whether additional type of discipline is warranted, whether that's a fine or a suspension. Basically, it's important to remember, Jaylen Carter served a one-game suspension last night. He might be the first player in NFL history to get onto the field and get ejected prior than playing a single snap on the field. So that's usually taken into account. It's rare, not unprecedented for players to get suspended after being ejected from the game. The fact that he missed the entire game probably would point you toward this is not going to be a suspension, which, by the way, week 2 is against, it's a Super Bowl rematch against the Chiefs team that you are going to see tonight. Additionally, beyond that, there's been spitting incidents in the past. You remember Sean Taylor in a playoff game years ago. There was Bill Romanowski famously involved in something. Usually those have been handled by fines and not suspensions. Jaylen Carter does not have a long disciplinary history in the NFL. These are all reasons to think that he's not going to get suspended. But again, the NFL's got an extra time because the Eagles don't play again for another, 9 days here. And so they can fully evaluate this. I imagine that we've got some type of word here in the next day or so on what his status is. And then with regard to the Roger McDowell in all this, Rich, the second spitter, Dak Prescott, there's no equivalency here. There's no rule against somebody spitting in the general direction of another player who is several yards away from them. What you can't do is walk directly up and spit on a guy's chest point blank. I would be surprised if there's any discipline for Dak Prescott. But again, they'll review the entirety of the situation and come to those determinations probably in the next 24 hours or so.
Yeah, general direction was a very Monty Python way of putting that, Tom. I appreciate that. As for this game,
to say that, Siciliano texted me that this morning as well, because I used the same phrasing on Good Morning Football. I actually went back and looked at that scene, Rich, and later on, the line that comes like 3 lines later is, I will come down there and taunt you a second time, which taunting twice would also get you ejected from an NFL game.
No, I thought that was Nolan Smith who got flagged for for taunting while we're continuing the theme. As for the game here tonight, again, you're probably hearing some music that's going down on the field here at Arena Corinthians. Mekhi Becton has suddenly shown up on the injury report with an illness. Is this going to be an issue from what you're hearing potentially for tonight's game, Chargers and Chiefs, sir?
I have checked on it. There's no firm word at this point of whether he just did something I've done before and overate at a Fogo de Chao. I'm sure there's something better than that actually in Brazil. Or whether this is something that's significantly going to keep him out for the game. We've still got, 6 hours or so until kickoff here. There's no firm word on that. The fact he's added, anytime anybody's dealing with an illness during the day, you have to add him onto the report. If you don't, it could be a problem down the line. But certainly that would be something significant because you remember they're already reconstructing this offensive line after losing Rashawn Slater. Joe Alt's going to be flipping over to left tackle. If you took Becton out, that would be pretty significant when you're dealing with Chris Jones inside as well. And so certainly something to keep an eye on, but no firm word on that just yet.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. I am inside Arena Corinthians Stadium. There's already some musical acts. You could already tell it's not an act. They're going through the national anthem of the United States of America that's being played tonight. So excuse me for conducting the business of this show while that song is being played behind me. Tom Pelissero joining me on the Rich Eisen Show. Christian McCaffrey showed up on an injury report, Tom. Out of the blue, it appears, on Thursday. Is there any cause for alarm? Because last year that happened, and all of a sudden his 2025 went south.
Well, and that's where I would caution anybody to make firm judgments off this. What I would tell you is, from my conversations last night after this came out on the injury report, because nobody knew about it prior to that, the feedback I got was, don't sound the alarm bells just yet. This is not a DEFCON 1 type of a situation. If there's any player you're going to take precautions with if you feel something weird, it's going to be your best player, and a guy who's had 3 seasons essentially in his career ruined by injuries here. It would make sense if he felt anything in that cap to pull him off. Having said that, you're right. We didn't know until, an hour before inactives last year that Christian McCaffrey was not going to play in week 1. And then he didn't end up returning until November. Obviously played a little bit, wasn't quite himself, and then suffered another injury, a knee injury that took him out. Calves can be tricky. Calves can be precursors to Achilles injuries. McCaffrey had issues with both his Achilles last year. There's a lot of reasons to be cautious about saying anything at this stage. He was undergoing tests today. They're on the field in 90 minutes or so. The real question, at least short term, is even if it is something that's a precaution, even if they think it's minor, do they risk running him out there in week 1 and suffering a type of setback that could take him out for a month? All those questions will start to get answered this afternoon. Again, from my understanding, I do not believe that this is the full alert, the alarms going off on Christian McCaffrey, but definitely something to keep an eye on.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. When the Texans take on the Rams, obviously we're going to be looking to see any twinge, any moment where Matthew Stafford has a back injury that crops back up again. What's the status going into this game? Cautious optimism that he won't have an issue, or he's practicing like it's no big deal?
He's not on the injury report, Rich, which by rule means that he's not receiving regular treatment on his back at this point. Back injuries can be extremely complicated. I can say that as somebody who tweaked my back again yesterday. I'm currently sitting on a heating pad, have a heavy dose of steroids and muscle relaxers. I would categorize myself as questionable for Sunday, but I'm pretty sure I'm getting on that plane to Boston tomorrow to do the Patriots and Raiders game. You just don't know. But everything, all the stuff in terms of how the Rams have approached this over the last week or so, the word has been positive coming out of there. It's a minor thing. They picked up his option yesterday for the 27 through 30 seasons. Doesn't actually mean anything. It just keeps status quo in terms of the cap considerations. But there's nothing that would tell you they think that this is going to be an issue. But it's a back, and it's something that can be, especially for an older player. We've seen Stafford take a ton of hits, Rich, through the course of his career. There's plenty of times he's gotten blindsided because he just stands in there and is willing to take those hits. He plays through a lot. If he starts having back spasms, obviously, or something related to that disc issue that he has in his back, then potentially it could become an issue down the road. It'll be interesting to see, to me, Rich, because again, I don't think there's any question right now Matthew Stafford is starting on Sunday against the Texans, but do we see Sean McVay maybe even more than he already does, lean a little bit more toward the rhythm passing game, get the ball out of his hand, just try to do things to limit the number of hits just until they see, okay, 70 snaps in the game, how does he function? Make sure that he's getting into this and not getting blasted on the first third down they see.
But he's going against the defense, though. It may not matter how quickly you get rid of the ball. The Texans, as we all know, are pretty darn good on that side of the football. And then offensively, Joe Mixon is out for at least the first 4 games. Can you tell me about his injury, when he's expected back, and how the split of carries with Nick Chubb, and obviously Dameon Pierce is a name that Texans fans are familiar with when he was the bell cow a couple of years ago. Any sense of the Texans' run game going into this Los Angeles Rams visit for them to open the season?
At this point, there's no timeline for Joe Mixon to return. He's out a minimum of 4 games, but there's no one I've spoken to who says, hey, after those 4 games, he's definitely going to be back. And so that's very much an unknown as the Texans proceed into this season, but they did sign insurance with Nick Chubb. I would say, and again, game flow can dictate these things sometimes, but it seems like Nick Chubb is going to be the bell cow back, at least going into the season. Dameon Pierce played extensively in the preseason finale, which is usually something reserved for guys that you don't even know if they're going to make the team, or maybe you're trying to to showcase in a potential trade. So I would anticipate, remember, I've heard Nick Chubb looks great down there. He's had obviously a lot of injuries. He's an older player. That stuff's added up going all the way back to the injury he had in college, but he looks really good right now. It seems like he's going to be the guy with Dameon Pierce spelling him. And, maybe that even extends here out beyond 4 weeks because there's just not certainty on when we see Joe Mixon back on the field.
And then in terms of Micah Parsons, man, I mean, I'm reading from yesterday's press conference with Matt LaFleur talking about that they're hopeful, no guarantees, that Micah's going to be out there against the Detroit Lions. Today, the coach said that Micah, quote-unquote, looks limited when he's out there on the field. I'll be honest with you, man. I thought that was just posturing with the Cowboys to basically say, I'm injured, I can't get out there. How serious is his back injury, Tom?
I saw that quote from Matt LaFleur, and I would just say, knowing Matt, if he says Micah was limited, because that's what the report says, then someone says, well, how does he look? Matt's probably going to reply, he looked limited. In other words, I'm not giving you one additional ounce of information publicly on exactly what this guy's going to do. It's a real injury. It's an L4, L5 facet joint sprain. We're talking a lot about backs, which is making mine feel great right now. But with Micah, I would be surprised. I'd be really surprised if he's not out there. You don't give a guy a 4-year, $186 million contract extension if you don't think he's going to be able to play in the early going. Now, do they manage him to some degree? I think you would do that regardless of the injury, just because he missed so much time on the field. The conditioning may not be exactly where you want it to be. It might be asking a lot for a guy to go from not practicing all of camp to 10 days later playing 70 snaps full go in a regular season game against the super physical Lions team. They'll probably pick their spots a little bit with Micah Parsons, but whether he ends up getting some type of an injection or not, again, I would be really surprised if we don't see Micah out there and see him quite a bit on Sunday.
All right. And is there anybody that could maybe sign some big fat contract between now and Sunday? That always seems to happen this time of year where it's a last minute. Obviously, we were expecting Dak to get his new deal last year, but is there anybody out there that there's still something lingering that could be handled before a game gets played Sunday, Tom?
The only really big one would be Lamar Jackson. And I can tell you there have been negotiations. They have been, they've talked extensively about what a deal might look like for Lamar Jackson, but he's in a unique spot here. Obviously, Eric DeCosta, the GM, has said publicly they want to get something done with Lamar sooner than later, which makes sense. He's a two-time NFL MVP who's somehow still only 28 years old. And the sooner you can lock in a deal, the more cost certainty you have in terms of how you build your roster for years to come. But Lamar is due, I think it's like $42 million this year and $52 in each of the next 2 years. In other words, from a cash earning perspective, sometimes you get in the late years of a contract and those numbers go down. Lamar is still one of the top cash earning players over the next several years. And so there's really no reason for Lamar to rush and take a deal, because he is making that type of money. Also because we've seen in the past, Lamar just doesn't think about money the way that a lot of us do. He played out after winning MVP, he played out the 4th year on his contract for like $2.3 million. Then he played on the 5th year option, and he allowed himself to get franchise tagged. I mean, he went a long way further than he would have if he had an agent. No agent would have told him to go out there and play for a couple $1 million after winning an NFL MVP. But in this case, he is financially secure. Once the season starts, he said himself yesterday, his focus is going to be on football. And it seems like that's where it is. But you have a team that would like to do a deal sooner than later. And you have a player that the deal's out there for him. The only question is, based upon how much money he's still earning right now, Rich, do you take a deal that locks you in for years to come at a time the salary cap continues to rise? Or do you sit back for a year or even two and go, C.J. Stroud's going to get paid. Bryce Young might get paid. Jaden Daniels in a couple of years is going to get paid. I can let all those guys reset the top of the market, and I'll leapfrog them as I get a little bit later on in my deal. That's kind of the give and take in that situation. But that's really the only one, Rich, that I think would be headline news on game day morning on Sunday. At this point, I'd lean that it doesn't happen, but we'll see.
Anybody from the Cowboys organization reach out to you today to sort of spike a little bit of a football? I know that they didn't win, but Kenny Clark played a really good game, man. In terms of yards per carry last night, it was 4 yards better for the Dallas defense in terms of giving up yards per carry with Kenny Clark on the field than off it. Saquon held to only 60 yards rushing. I know Jaylen had today, but anybody from the Cowboys reach out to you to say, I told you so? We're going to be okay? Anybody?
I think they were mainly focused on getting back. I think they probably got back to the facility at like 7 a.m. today in zombie mode after the lightning delay that delayed the whole thing. No, but I would tell you this, because I talked to a lot of people after the Micah trade, and there was still confidence in that building. I mean, you might say that's false confidence, and, listen, all 32 teams have something to be optimistic about, but really, when I talk to people, there was no like, oh my God, we just punted on the season. There's a lot of positive energy around that place right now. They feel like they've got weapons offensively. Javonte Williams, Rich, I remember us talking about this a couple of months ago. What are they going to do in the backfield? And I was hearing back in May and June, like Javonte looks like finally he's that guy who was gashing people before he suffered the knee injury a few years ago. Well, you saw that last night. He's moving the pile. He's a really physical runner. That part is positive. George Pickens didn't have a big night in terms of receiving the football, but CeeDee Lamb certainly got a ton of opportunities. And when you have to account for Pickens, that opens some things up for CD. You just hope that he holds on to the ball. And if CD makes even one or two of those, 3-4 balls that hit him in the hands, the Cowboys might come out of there with a win last night. Dak looks really lean. He looked like he was, in the flow of it and was moving around really well coming off of that hamstring injury. They've obviously got an offensive line. The question is still just going to be all the way through. Do they have enough pass rush? Can they get home? And when you saw, how many plays in those first couple of drives where it's 4, 5, 6 seconds of Jaylen in the pocket, and then you can get escapes and runs, and those are the things that you worry about with that team. But absolutely, you saw a team last night in Dallas that looked like what everybody there claimed they were going to be, even post Micah, which is a team that's together. Maybe there's a little bit of a message it sends to your locker room of like, oh crap, like if they can trade Micah, they can trade anybody in here. There are environmental things that shift a little bit when you're trading one of your most outspoken, best, and what would have been one of your most highly paid types of players. They came out with some fire. They were really good offensively in the first half, just didn't quite have it in the second half. But again, if CD makes catches that we'll see him make 9 times out of 10, Rich, they might upset the Eagles, which bodes well for the Cowboys' chances of competing with basically anybody else in the NFL.
Last one for you, Tom. What have I not asked you? Open the book. What should we know about in week one that that you're willing to share right now for all of us? What do you got?
Yeah. The only other thing that's kind of hanging out there is what's going on with Cam Hayward in Pittsburgh. He got a veteran rest day yesterday. It wasn't contract related, but he's continued to, kind of try to raise the hair on people's necks a little bit by talking about his contract. Is he going to actually not play in the game if they don't sign him to a contract? I don't foresee that. But certainly, he did this last year too. They gave him an extension without really giving him new money. Then he comes back a year later. Teams don't like to redo deals a year later. The 49ers just found their solve with Juwan Jennings. They gave him $3 million in playtime incentives because you don't want to say, all right, we're going to give you a huge raise, because then everybody else after one good year is going to come back and ask for raises. That's the only other thing that's kind of hanging out there. But it's also a matter of, as we get past this first week of games, you very quickly start to see, and as much as week one can be a liar, you start to see some of those things that you heard in the offseason, like, okay, that might have been true about this player struggling, or this team, this particular part of the coaching staff isn't doing very well. You find out, hey, maybe that was overblown, or, oh no, that does look like some of those things you were hearing behind the scenes. So I'm sure by the start of next week, we'll be talking about some things in terms of what coaches could be on the hot seat and what quarterbacks could be in danger of getting benched. For now, it's nothing but smooth sailing, Rich. Everybody's got something to be positive about across the NFL. I'll be interested to see the game I'm doing, and I'll be talking with you for 4 hours on Sunday morning. The Raiders and the Patriots. There's so much new on both sides of that thing, from Mike Vrabel and Pete Carroll as the new head coaches. Obviously, Geno Smith taking over as the Raiders quarterback. Stephon Diggs making his debut. For all the speculation about Diggs, Rich, in this offseason, I'm fully anticipating, based on every conversation I have, to see Stephon Diggs the way that we've known him, going out there and being able to make plays in that game. I think that's, we got some of the young stars in that game, Ashton Genty, Travion Henderson on the other side. It's not a game that a lot of people are going to be talking about. It's in that 1 p.m. Eastern window, but I think it's going to be a fun one out there in Foxborough.
Oh, no doubt about it, man. Pete Carroll's back on the sideline, and it's back where he once belonged, obviously, for a cup of coffee before Belichick took over there for 20-plus years. He's back with the Raiders. on the East Coast. It's Vrabel's return to the fold there in New England. I'm with you, man. That's gonna be a good one. Thanks, Tom. More ibuprofen, sir. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Can't be questionable. You got to do it.
I'll be watching you tonight, flat on my back.
See you,
All
Tom.
right.
All right, Tommy.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.